I was eating lunch at my desk when the fraud department called. They read me the loan number, the account address, and the signature on file. The address was mine, the signature was mine. I had never spoken to that bank in my life. I set down my fork. I asked the woman on the phone to read the loan number again. She did. I wrote it on a sticky note in handwriting I could barely recognize as my own, and asked her to hold for one moment while I closed my office door. My name is Adrienne Cole. I am 34 years old. I work as a senior project manager for a logistics company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and until 11 months ago I would have told you that my mother, Diane, was the person I trusted most in the world. I would have said it without hesitation. I would have meant it completely. My parents divorced when I was 12. My father moved to Phoenix and rebuilt his life in a way that did not include consistent contact with the daughter he left behind. My mother stayed in the house in Greensboro where I grew up, worked as an office manager for a pediatric dental practice for 19 years, and raised me with the particular combination of practicality and warmth that I have spent my adult life trying to replicate in everything I do. She taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 15. She co-signed my first apartment lease at 22 and paid the security deposit herself because I was $300 short and she did not want me to ask my father. She drove 4 hours to Charlotte when I had my appendix out 2 years ago and slept in a hospital chair for 2 nights without being asked. That is who I thought she was. That is the woman I was still believing in when the fraud department called. The bank was a regional lender called Piedmont Capital. I had never opened an account there, never applied for financing, never set foot in any of their branches. The loan was for $240,000, filed 6 weeks earlier, listed as a personal consolidation loan. The application used my full legal name, my social security number, my date of birth, my Charlotte address, and my employer's name and address. The monthly income listed was close to accurate. The signature at the bottom of every document was a careful imitation of mine, close enough to pass an initial review, not close enough to survive the kind of scrutiny that gets triggered when a borrower stops responding to standard onboarding correspondence. That was how the fraud team found it. After the loan was approved and funded, the bank sent 3 pieces of standard mail to my address in Charlotte. I never received them because I later discovered they had been rerouted. When I did not respond to the digital onboarding portal, a flag was generated. When the fraud analyst pulled the application and ran a cross-reference on the contact phone number, it did not match any number I had ever associated with my name in any financial record. It matched a number registered to my mother. The analyst on the phone told me this calmly and professionally, the way people deliver information they have delivered many times before. She told me the account had been flagged, not closed. She told me no payments had been made on the loan since funding. She told me the proceeds, all $240,000, had been dispersed to an external account at a different institution 4 days after approval. I asked her what I needed to do. She told me to contact an attorney before I did anything else, including calling anyone who might be involved. I hung up. I sat in my closed office for approximately 4 minutes. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Gwen Parrish, who had helped me close on my condo 2 years earlier and who I had kept on retainer for general counsel since then. I told her what the bank had told me. She asked me 3 questions, told me not to call my mother, and said she would call Piedmont Capital's legal department within the hour. I went back to my lunch. I did not eat it. I stared at the sticky note with the loan number on it and thought about my mother teaching me to balance a checkbook at the kitchen table in Greensboro 22 years ago, telling me that the most important thing a person could do with money was understand exactly where it was at all times. Gwen called me back at 4 in the afternoon. The bank had confirmed everything the analyst told me. They had already opened an internal fraud investigation. Because the loan exceeded $100,000 and involved forged federal identification documents, they were required to file a suspicious activity report with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This was not discretionary. It was not something I could ask them to delay or reconsider. The report had already been submitted by the time Gwen spoke to their legal team. She told me my next steps clearly. I needed to place a fraud alert on all 3 of my credit files immediately. I needed to file a police report in Charlotte because the fraudulent application listed my Charlotte address as the primary residence. I needed to provide the bank with a written identity theft affidavit, which she would draft for me. and I needed to understand that a federal referral was now a realistic possibility, which would involve investigators I had no control over and a timeline I could not predict. I asked her what would happen to my mother. Gwen was quiet for a moment. She said that depended on a number of things, including what the money had been used for and whether my mother cooperated with investigators. She said she could not advise me on what to do about my personal relationship with my mother, only on how to protect myself legally. She said those two things might require me to make decisions that were very difficult to separate. I filed the police report the next morning. The officer who took my statement was thorough and kind. He explained that identity theft of this scale was typically referred to the district attorney's office, and that I should expect to be contacted by a detective within 2 weeks. He told me the same thing Gwen had told me. Do not contact the person you believe is responsible before speaking to investigators. I had not called my mother yet. I had spoken to her twice since the bank called, once when she phoned on Sunday evening as she always did, and once when she texted asking if I wanted her to come to Charlotte for my birthday the following month. Both times I answered normally. I said I was busy at work. I said the birthday visit sounded nice. I gave her nothing that would signal what I knew, because Gwen had advised me clearly and because some part of me, the part that still held the image of her sleeping in a hospital chair, needed more information before I could process what she had done. The detective assigned to my case was named Marcus Webb. He called me on a Thursday morning, 14 days after the police report. He asked me to come into the station and bring whatever financial documentation I had. I brought everything Gwen had compiled, the fraud alert confirmations, the identity theft affidavit, a timeline of every piece of mail and correspondence I had and had not received in the weeks surrounding the loan application. Detective Webb told me, after reviewing the documents, what his investigation had already established. My mother had applied for the loan in my name at a Piedmont Capital branch in Greensboro. She had presented what appeared to be a copied version of my state identification and a pay stub that had been altered with my employer's information. The branch manager who processed the application had spoken with someone on the phone during the verification call, a standard step in large personal loan approvals. That person had identified themselves as Adrian Cole. It was not me. The $240,000 had been transferred to an account my mother opened jointly with a man named Gary Foss, whom I had never heard of. Detective Webb showed me a photograph. I did not recognize him. He told me Gary Foss had 3 prior fraud-related charges in 2 different states, 1 conviction in South Carolina from 2019, and an active warrant in Virginia. I sat with that information for a long time. My mother had been involved with someone I had never met, someone with a documented history of financial fraud, and she had taken out a loan in my name to fund something I still did not fully understand. Whether she had been coerced, manipulated, or a willing participant was a question I could not answer sitting in that detective's office. What I could see clearly, looking at the photograph of Gary Foss and thinking about the woman who taught me to balance a checkbook, was that somewhere in the last few years something had gone badly wrong in her life and she had not told me. Detective Webb arrested my mother on a Tuesday in October. She was charged with identity theft, forgery, and bank fraud. Gary Foss was picked up 2 days later in connection with the Virginia warrant and the Charlotte investigation. I was not in Greensboro when it happened. I did not watch it occur. Gwen called me that evening to let me know, and I sat on my kitchen floor for a while. Not crying exactly, just very still. My mother called me from the county jail the following morning. I answered because Gwen had told me it was now legally safe to do so, and because I had been waiting for this conversation since the fraud analyst read me the loan number 6 weeks earlier. Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. She did not offer an explanation immediately. She said my name, and then she was quiet, and I waited, and eventually she said that she was sorry, and that she knew that was not enough. I told her she was right. It was not enough. She told me about Gary Foss then, in pieces, over the course of a phone call that lasted just under 40 minutes. They had met 18 months ago. He had been attentive and convincing in the specific way that experienced manipulators learn to be. He had told her about a real estate investment that required capital she did not have. He had suggested, gradually and carefully, that there were ways to access financing that did not have to burden her directly. She had believed him. She had also, at some point that she could not clearly identify in the telling, stopped believing him and done it anyway, because she was already too far in to see a way out that did not cost her everything. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her one question. I asked her why she had not called me. She did not have an answer for that. She tried twice and stopped both times. I think what she could not say, and what I have spent the months since then slowly understanding, is that she knew exactly what I would have done if she had called me. I would have helped her. I would have found a way to get her out of whatever Gary Foss had pulled her into without anyone's identity being stolen and without a federal fraud charge. She knew that, and she still made the choice she made, and I do not yet fully understand why, and I may not for a long time. My credit was restored after a process that took 4 months and required more paperwork than I have generated in my entire professional career. Gwen handled most of it with a precision I will be grateful for the rest of my life. Piedmont Capital absorbed the loan loss as a fraud write-off after the investigation confirmed I had no knowledge of or access to the funds. My name was cleared in every financial database that had flagged it. My mother's case went to the district attorney. She accepted a plea agreement in the spring. 2 years of supervised probation, restitution requirements tied to whatever assets could be recovered from Gary Foss, and a felony record that will follow her for the remainder of her life. Gary Foss received a considerably longer sentence, which was the appropriate outcome, and which gave me very little satisfaction. I have spoken to my mother 4 times since the plea. The conversations are short and careful, the way conversations are when 2 people are trying to figure out if there is anything left underneath the damage. I do not know yet if there is. I am not ready to decide. What I know is that the woman who drove 4 hours and slept in a hospital chair is still in there somewhere, underneath the choices she made and the man who helped her make them. What I do not know is whether that is enough to rebuild on or simply enough to grieve. There is a sticky note in the drawer of my desk at work. I have not thrown it away. It has a loan number on it in handwriting I barely recognized as mine, written in the first seconds after I understood what had happened. I keep it because it reminds me of something I think is worth remembering. The call that changed everything did not come from the person who wronged me. It came from a stranger at a bank doing her job carefully enough to notice that something was wrong. Sometimes the system works exactly the way it is supposed to. Sometimes the people closest to us are not who we thought they were. And sometimes those 2 things happen on the same Tuesday afternoon, while your lunch is going cold on your desk and the door to your office is closed.